What happens when a plane built to kill Soviet tanks suddenly shows up hunting boats in one of the most dangerous, most economically vital waterways on the face of this earth? That is exactly what is happening right now. The A-10 Warthog, a jet that military planners had been trying to retire for years, is back in active combat. It is circling above the Strait of Hormuz, hunting down Iranian fast attack boats and picking apart one of the most disruptive, asymmetric naval strategies the world has seen in decades. This is not a routine patrol story. This is not a minor footnote in a distant conflict. This is a signal, a loud cannon fire signal, that the fight around Iran has entered a brutal new phase in one of the most strategically critical choke points on the planet. Nearly 20% of the world's daily oil supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz. That is around 21 million barrels per day, every single day, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. When that corridor is threatened, the entire global economy feels it. And right now, it is being threatened and contested in ways we have not seen since the 1970s energy crisis. So, why bring back this old war machine now? Why the Warthog of all things? How is a Cold War-era aircraft suddenly so relevant in a 21st century maritime conflict? And what does it tell us about where this war is heading next? Stay with us because this story goes far deeper than one aircraft. It goes to the heart of energy markets, global trade, the future of warfare, and the limits of Iran's power. And if this kind of deep breakdown is what you come here for, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell so you never miss any updates. Let's start with the confirmed facts and build from there. On March 19, 2026, during a Pentagon press briefing, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, made an announcement that immediately went around the world. As reported by Air Force Times and confirmed across multiple defense outlets, Kane stated that the A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is actively hunting and killing fast attack watercraft in the Strait of Hormuz. Those were not vague words. That was a direct operational declaration. But the story had actually started a few days earlier. On March 15th, U.S. Central Command released imagery showing A-10C Thunderbolt II aircraft receiving aerial refueling while supporting Operation Epic Fury. In an accompanying post, CENTCOM stated that the A-10 Thunderbolt II can loiter for hours, standing by and ready to execute a mission whenever needed. The images were significant because they showed the Warthogs were not simply passing through. They were on extended station, they were armed, and they were in it for the long game. Now, to understand why this matters, you need to understand the broader context, because the Warthog's role cannot be separated from the conflict in which it is operating. Operation Epic Fury is the U.S. code name for the joint military operation with Israel that launched on February 28, 2026. According to reporting from Britannica and multiple major news organizations, the opening strike targeted Iranian command and control centers, IRGC headquarters, ballistic missile sites, naval forces, and military airfields. Crucially, it also killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, in the very first wave of attacks. That single event sent shockwaves through Tehran and immediately triggered retaliatory missile and drone strikes across the region. Iranian missiles hit U.S. military bases in Qatar and Bahrain. Drones struck Gulf energy infrastructure. And then came the move that shook global markets harder than almost anything else. Iran declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. That declaration triggered what some analysts have called the greatest energy security crisis in history. According to data tracked by the Council on Foreign Relations, ship trafficking through the strait dropped by 70% almost immediately after Operation Epic Fury launched. As reported by Reuters, Janes, and CNBC, global shipping giants, including Maersk, MSC, and Hapag-Lloyd, suspended all vessel transit through the route. Some ships rerouted around Africa's Cape of Good Hope, adding days and enormous cost to every voyage, As reported by the Wall Street Journal, approximately 20,000 sailors found themselves stranded aboard roughly 300 vessels, unable to safely transit one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. The number of daily transits, which normally ran at around 138 vessels per day according to the UAE shipping tracker, collapsed. By early April, only around 12 vessels were openly making the crossing per day. That is not a disruption. That is a near-complete seizure of a global artery, and the price consequences were immediate and severe. As reported by NBC News and CNBC, Brent crude oil surpassed $100 per barrel on March 8, 2026, for the first time in 4 years. It then climbed to a peak of $126 per barrel on March 19th. Dubai crude hit $166, the highest price ever recorded. RBC Capital Markets chief commodities strategist Halima Croft described it directly. This absolutely dwarfs what we saw in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Beyond oil, European natural gas prices jumped 24% within days of the Strait's closure. According to Jane's intelligence, the ripple effects spread further still. Aluminum, helium, and fertilizer prices all surged. Middle Eastern granular urea prices rose by nearly 20% in the first weeks of March alone, threatening food production cycles in countries that depend on spring fertilizer deliveries. According to analysts tracking the crisis, the Gulf Cooperation Council states rely on the Strait for over 80% of their food imports. That is not just a market problem, that is a humanitarian one. So when we talk about the A-10 Warthog hunting fast attack boats in the Strait of Hormuz, we are not talking about a niche military story. We are talking about an aircraft directly participating in a campaign to restore the flow of one of the most important economic corridors on Earth. Every boat taken out, every threat degraded is another step toward reopening a lane that keeps the global economy alive. That is the true weight of this deployment, and that is exactly why World Brief Daily is here to cut through the noise and show you what is actually at stake. Now, back to the aircraft itself. On the surface, using an A-10 over water against small, fast-moving boats seems strange. This is a jet designed for a very different kind of war. It was built in the 1970s to kill Soviet tanks on the plains of Central Europe. It was made to fly low, absorb punishment, and grind through. Armor with its iconic Ju-8 Avenger cannon, a 7-barrel 30mm rotating autocannon so powerful that the aircraft was essentially designed around it. In the Gulf War, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, the Warthog became legendary for its close air support role, its willingness to fly into danger zones that other jets would avoid, and its almost supernatural ability to take damage and keep flying. But a maritime interdiction role against fast attack boats in a narrow, contested waterway, that sounds like a job for something faster, something stealthier, something more modern. So what is the logic? The logic, once you understand the specific threat, is actually crystal clear. And here is where it gets interesting. Iran's fast attack boat strategy is not designed to win a naval battle. It is designed to make the Strait too dangerous, too unpredictable, too costly to use. The IRGC Navy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' naval arm, has spent years perfecting swarm tactics. They use dozens of small, fast, low-profile boats operating in coordinated groups. Some carry explosives. Some are remote-controlled, kamikaze-style unmanned surface vessels, a technology that Iran and its regional proxies actually pioneered years before Ukraine made similar USVs famous in the Black Sea. According to defense reporting by the War Zone and the Aviationist, Iran has brought all of these capabilities to bear in the 2026 conflict, using them to attack commercial shipping, threaten oil tankers, and maintain their de facto closure of the strait. Against this kind of threat, speed and stealth are not actually the most important qualities in an aircraft. Persistence is. What you need is an aircraft that can loiter, circle overhead for hours, visually scan the water, track movements, and wait for the right moment. These boats are small, they blend into maritime clutter, they move fast, and they time their attacks carefully. An F-35 dashing in and out at high altitude and high speed is not ideal for tracking a fast boat skimming the surface at 30 knots in a complex, cluttered environment, but an aircraft that can stay overhead, circle patiently, track the threat visually, and then strike at close range, that is the Warthog. That is exactly the mission profile it was built for, just over water targets instead of land targets. As CENTCOM described it, the A-10 can loiter for hours standing by and ready to execute a mission whenever needed. That is not just promotional language. In this context, it is a precise tactical description. There is also the weapons package to consider. As reported by Aerospace Global News and The Aviationist, A-10C Thunderbolt IIs deployed in Operation Epic Fury have been photographed carrying AGM-65 Maverick air-to-surface missiles, AGR-20 APKWS-2 laser-guided 70mm rockets, and AM-9M Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. The Mavericks and laser-guided rockets give the aircraft precision standoff capability against larger vessels. The 30mm cannon gives it devastating close-range lethality against smaller, lightly armored craft, and the Sidewinders, those provide self-defense capability and notably a potential tool against Iranian one-way attack drones, which have been a persistent threat throughout the campaign. According to the War Zone, A-10s are also capable of employing air-to-air optimized versions of the APKWS-2 rocket against drones, making the Warthog a multi-role counter-threat platform in this environment. But the most overlooked part of this story is that none of this was improvised. The A-10's maritime role was not invented for this conflict. It was trained for, planned for, and prepared for across years of quiet exercises. As documented by The Aviationist, the type has been used to target swarms of boats and strike small vessels in multiple maritime surface warfare exercises going back years. In September 2023, two A-10s engaged simulated surface threats in the Gulf of Oman alongside the guided missile destroyer USS Stetham. In early 2026, just weeks before Operation Epic Fury launched, the U.S. Air Force and Navy confirmed that A-10s were preparing for a close air support mission for the littoral combat ship USS Santa Barbara in the Arabian Gulf as part of the force buildup leading into the operation. The playbook existed, the training had been done, the pairing of aircraft and mission had already been validated. When the moment came, the Warthog was ready. Iran was not facing a gimmick. It was facing a threat that American planners had spent years designing, practicing, and refining specifically to counter the IRGC's maritime harassment strategy. And that brings us to the broader operational picture, because as extraordinary as the A-10 deployment is, it is one layer in a multi-layered campaign. The Pentagon's approach has been deliberately shaped around the target type. According to Jerusalem Post and Wall Street Journal reporting, while A-10s go after fast attack boats in the Strait, heavier munitions are being used elsewhere. CENTCOM confirmed the use of multiple 5,000 lb deep penetrating bombs to strike Iranian missile sites along the coast near the Strait of Hormuz. These are hardened bunker targets, the kind of infrastructure that Iran has built into coastal cliffs and tunnel networks to survive conventional strikes. According to CNN and multiple defense sources, Iran is believed to retain significant capabilities, including sea mines, truck-mounted cruise missiles, and hundreds of attack boats, many of them concealed in hardened coastal facilities. The campaign, therefore, has to operate at multiple levels simultaneously, destroying boats in the water, destroying the sites that support them, and suppressing the missile threats that protect both. General Kane's March 19th briefing reflected exactly this layered approach. As reported by Flight Global, Kane stated that the U.S. is now flying further east and penetrating deeper into Iranian airspace to hunt and destroy one-way attack systems. In addition, as reported by the Jerusalem Post and confirmed by the Wall Street Journal, AH-64 Apache helicopters from both U.S. forces and regional allies have also joined the fight on the southern flank, targeting threats before they can escalate, including intercepting one-way attack drones that Iran has fired at airports, energy facilities, and American bases throughout the Gulf region. By March 4th, Kane had already declared that the U.S. had achieved localized air superiority across the southern flank of the Iranian coast. The A-10s came into that established air superiority envelope, where the biggest remaining air defense threats are likely man-portable systems, shoulder-fired missiles, and close-range surface hazards, exactly the threat profile the Warthog was designed to survive. This is also the right moment to zoom out and talk about what the A-10 deployment tells us about Iran's actual strategic position, because the picture it reveals is not flattering for Tehran. Iran cannot match the United States ship or aircraft for aircraft. It never could. That is not the point of its strategy. The point is disruption. The logic has always been, if conventional victory is impossible, make the environment dangerous and costly enough that even a stronger enemy has to pay an unacceptable price. Fast attack boats are cheap. They are politically low risk. They give Iran plausible deniability in some scenarios and clear leverage in others. The strait becomes a weapon not because Iran can close it permanently, but because the threat alone is enough to spike insurance premiums, reroute tankers, halt shipping, and send oil prices rocketing. But there is a critical vulnerability in that strategy. It depends on the threat remaining credible. The moment the fast boats start getting hunted and destroyed systematically, the model starts to unravel. According to CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper in a statement reported across multiple outlets, as of March 16th, U.S. forces had destroyed more than 100 Iranian naval vessels. Cooper stated directly, "We will continue to rapidly deplete Iran's ability to threaten freedom of navigation in and around the Strait of Hormuz." 100 vessels. That is not a minor tactical success. That is a systematic dismantling of the maritime harassment capability Iran spent years building. And now the Warthogs are adding to that toll round by round, loiter by loiter, over the same narrow strip of water that Iran declared was closed to the world. There is an irony at the center of all of this that is almost too good to pass up. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was supposed to be on its way out. For years, the Air Force had been trying to retire it. Budget documents for fiscal year 2026 called for the entire remaining Warthog fleet to be phased out by 2027. The F-35 was pitched as its replacement for the close air support role. But as experts told Defense One, the F-35 faces real questions about whether it can truly replace the Warthog in close, persistent, low-altitude combat. One analyst put it bluntly, the F-35 was the national security establishment going through a midlife crisis and purchasing a Ferrari. The A-10 is like that old, reliable pickup truck that keeps providing useful service as long as you maintain it. And Congress agreed. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026, signed into law in December 2025, blocked the Air Force's divestment plan and mandated a minimum inventory of 103 A-10s through at least September 30th, 2026. Now, with the Warthog proving its value in live combat over the Strait of Hormuz, the debate about its retirement has taken on an entirely new dimension. Some experts, according to Defense One reporting, are calling this deployment a wake-up call that should make both Air Force officials and lawmakers reconsider the aircraft's future entirely. It would be easy to tell this story only in terms of hardware and tactics, but that would miss the most important part. Because this conflict is not happening in a vacuum. It is happening in a waterway that connects the energy that heats homes, powers factories, and fuels transport for billions of people across Asia, Europe, and beyond. The human costs are already staggering. According to the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis analysis and reporting from Jane's Intelligence, the closure of the strait has triggered fertilizer price spikes that threaten food production cycles across multiple continents. The Gulf states themselves face grocery supply emergencies because their own food supply chains flow through the corridor Iran declared closed. In neighboring countries, panic buying has been reported at fuel stations. The S&P 500 dropped more than 1.5% in a single session. The average 30-year mortgage rate in the United States climbed to its highest level since February. Stocks tumbled across global markets as uncertainty about energy supply cascaded through every sector of the global economy. As of early April 2026, Iran has made at least 24 confirmed attacks on commercial vessels in and near the strait. According to shipping trackers, only a tiny fraction of the 138 vessels that once transited daily are now doing so. Saudi officials, according to reporting by multiple outlets, have warned that if the conflict extends into late April, oil prices could surge to $180 per barrel. 6 allied nations, France, Britain, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, have said they are ready to contribute to securing navigation in the strait, but have stopped short of committing warships. French President Emmanuel Macron has suggested any future maritime security mission should take place under a United Nations framework, and only after the war ends. In the meantime, the U.S. is doing the heavy lifting with the Warthog circling above, keeping the pressure on. Iran's response to the military pressure has been complex. On March 26th, as reported by the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis analysis, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced that ships from 5 specific nations, China, Russia, India, Iraq, and Pakistan, would be allowed to transit the strait. Malaysia and Thailand later secured access through diplomatic negotiations with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. Iran also agreed to allow humanitarian and fertilizer shipments through the strait following a UN request on March 27th. These are not the actions of a country confidently in control. These are the actions of a regime that is managing pressure, trying to maintain enough leverage to negotiate while simultaneously dealing with a military campaign that is degrading its operational capacity day by day. And then there is the financial dimension that almost nobody is talking about. According to shipping trackers, Iran's ghost fleet continues to operate, loading crude oil, transiting the very strait it declared closed, and heading east toward its primary buyer, China. Since the start of the conflict, analysts have tracked at least 27 Iranian oil loadings, mostly from Karg Island, representing approximately 38 million barrels and generating estimated revenue of over $3 billion for the IRGC. That is the regime funding the same missile programs and drone systems that are disrupting global shipping using oil revenue generated by a strait they publicly declared closed. It is one of the starkest contradictions in the entire conflict, and it matters strategically. According to reporting by Axios, cited in the Jerusalem Post, the Trump administration was weighing plans to either seize or blockade Karg Island, which handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports, as a means of cutting off the IRGC's primary revenue stream and forcing a genuine cessation. President Trump later announced that CENTCOM had struck Karg Island directly. The regime's image is also under pressure in ways it may not have anticipated. Iran has long used external confrontation to project strength at home. The Strait of Hormuz in particular has been a powerful symbol, a geographic lever that Tehran has wielded rhetorically for decades. But symbols require credibility. When a boat is taken out by a circling jet that NATO and the Air Force itself thought belonged in retirement, that is not just a tactical loss. That is an image problem. Every failed harassment attempt, every hull that sinks without accomplishing its goal, every drone swatted down by an Apache on each one is another data point that contradicts the narrative of an invincible Islamic Revolutionary Guard Navy protecting the Islamic Republic's sovereign waters. The myth erodes slowly at first, then faster. The challenges, of course, are real and should not be minimized. Farzin Nadimi, an Iran expert at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, told the Wall Street Journal that it will take significant time to reduce maritime threats to a level that allows safe naval escort operations. And even then, Nadimi added, many Iranian assets will survive. Iran has deep coastal tunnel networks. Its fast boat fleets are distributed across multiple locations. Its mine-laying capability remains a serious threat. The U.S. military's own experience in the Yemen campaign against the Houthis, where over 1,000 targets were struck before a ceasefire was reached, shows that persistent asymmetric threats require sustained multi-domain responses before they can be managed to a safe level, but managed they can be, and the Warthog is part of how. What makes the A-10's deployment particularly significant is what it says about the design of the overall campaign. The platform selection is not random. It reflects careful analysis of the target environment, the threat level, the need for persistence, and the weapon systems most suited to close-range engagements against small, fast, lightly armored vessels. The Maverick missiles and APKWS rockets handle targets at standoff range. The 30mm cannon handles close targets with devastating effect. The loiter time handles the patience required by a mission profile where the targets are constantly moving, hiding, and timing their attacks. And the survivability features of the aircraft itself, the titanium bathtub protecting the cockpit, the redundant flight systems, the ability to fly and fight with significant battle damage, help manage the risk in an environment that, while not the most contested Iran can generate, still includes shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles and other threats. The broader campaign continues to evolve. As General Keane described, U.S. forces are now penetrating deeper into Iranian airspace, targeting one-way attack systems across a larger operational area. Apache helicopters are handling short-range drone threats on the southern flank. Carrier-based aircraft from the multiple U.S. carriers operating in the region are maintaining pressure on Iran's surviving air defense infrastructure, and the diplomatic track remains open, if tense. President Trump, as reported by the Wall Street Journal and others, has stated that the U.S. is in serious discussions with what he described as a new and more reasonable regime in Iran, while warning that if no deal is reached and the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened, the U.S. would strike Iranian energy infrastructure directly. On April 6, 2026, Britannica's live coverage noted that Iran rejected the latest ceasefire proposal as Trump's self-imposed deadline approached. The situation remains fluid. The stakes remain enormous. When you step back from all the tactical detail and look at the larger picture, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Strait of Hormuz has always been one of those places where geography becomes power. Iran understood that. It built a strategy around it. For years, the mere threat of disruption was enough to move markets, pressure adversaries, and give Tehran leverage it should not have had, given the size of its economy or the capabilities of its conventional military. But strategies built on threat only work as long as the threat holds. The moment the tools of that threat start getting dismantled, systematically, professionally, with an old jet that was supposed to be retired and a cannon that fires 30mm rounds at 4,200 per minute, the leverage begins to dissolve. That is what is happening over the Strait of Hormuz right now. Not in one dramatic strike, not in one viral video, slowly, persistently, loiter by loiter, round by round. The A-10 Warthog, the aircraft the Pentagon tried to retire, the plane that was supposed to belong to another era, is circling above one of the world's most important waterways and doing what it was always built to do: hunt, wait, strike, and make sure that whatever is threatening the people below it does not get the chance to try again. Iran spent years trying to turn a narrow stretch of water into a weapon. Now that same narrow stretch is revealing how fragile that strategy was all along.